Have you ever noticed how some people treat their own birthday like it's nothing? No posts, no plans, no candlelight reflected in their eyes. They go to work, scroll through their phone, reply with a polite thank you to whoever remembers, and move on as if the day were identical to every other. Yet beneath that calm indifference, there's often a quiet story unfolding. A story not about the absence of celebration, but the absence of safety in being seen. You tell yourself it's just another day. You don't need attention, you say. But a small voice buried deep inside still wonders, will anyone remember me without being reminded? That voice is older than you think. It was born the first time you felt invisible, the first time you learned that love often depends on how loud you are, or how well you perform, or how little you inconvenience others. So you became quiet. You stopped asking for things. You convinced yourself you didn't need the world to notice, because pretending not to care hurts less than caring and being forgotten. It's strange, isn't it? The paradox of wanting to matter, yet fearing what it means to admit it. You may scroll through other people's celebrations, balloons, hugs, laughter, echoing through glowing screens, and feel a brief tug in your chest. But then, just as quickly, you smother it. You call it maturity. You call it humility. You call it perspective, because it's easier to believe you've grown beyond the need for validation than to confront how much you still ache for it. Psychologically, this indifference is often a shield. Studies on emotional avoidance show that when a person experiences early disappointment or neglect, the brain learns to suppress expectation. It's a form of self-preservation, the mind equating hope with danger. So, every year, when your birthday arrives, your nervous system remembers the lessons of your past. It braces itself for silence. It chooses apathy over vulnerability. And in doing so, it keeps you safe, but also unseen. There's something haunting about that, isn't there? The idea that the very day meant to honor your existence becomes a quiet rehearsal of invisibility. You watch time move, year after year, but never stop to acknowledge the miracle of having survived another orbit around the Sunday. And so, your birthday becomes not a celebration of life, but a ritual of endurance. Yet, even in that silence, something in you still flickers. A tiny spark that refuses to die. The part of you that still remembers what it felt like to be a child, waiting for someone to notice. That's where this story begins, not in adulthood, but in the quiet corners of childhood, where the first forgotten candle was blown out long before it ever burned. Next comes the question of how such indifference is born, how a child learns that wanting to be celebrated is something to be ashamed of. Somewhere in the soft blur of memory, there's a child sitting quietly at a kitchen table. The house isn't cruel, but it's distracted, a mother pacing between chores, a father lost in silence, the air heavy with the kind of neglect that doesn't scream but hums. The child glances at the clock, waiting for something that never quite comes. No balloons, no laughter, no one to light the candle that marks their existence. And in that still moment, something inside them shifts, not with anger, but with understanding. An early understanding that they are not the kind of person people make time for. This is how it begins, not in grand traumas, but in small absences. The missed happy birthday, the forgotten pat on the shoulder, the gift that was promised but never arrived. Each instance becomes a quiet scar, shaping how the child learns to navigate love. According to attachment theory, the human brain wires itself through emotional mirroring. When joy is met with indifference, the nervous system learns to suppress it. When needs go unanswered, the mind learns to shrink those needs until they almost disappear. And so, the child builds a defense that sounds innocent. I don't care. But that sentence becomes a survival code, repeated until it feels like truth. You can almost picture it, a little one at school, watching as classmates pass around cake slices, laughing as their names are sung. They smile faintly, pretending not to notice that theirs wasn't mentioned. Pretending not to feel the sting of invisibility, because wanting something you won't receive hurts more than pretending you never wanted it at all. In psychology, this is called emotional withdrawal, a form of protective dissociation where the brain numbs longing to avoid pain. The child's reward system adapts, lowering its expectations for external validation. Over time, joy itself becomes suspicious. Celebration feels foreign, even unsafe. They grow up associating attention with disappointment, affection with performance, and recognition with vulnerability. So, when their next birthday comes and no one remembers, they call it fine. When someone finally does remember, they deflect, "You didn't have to." Because deep down, they've confused emotional invisibility with peace. They've mistaken numbness for maturity. It's tragic in its simplicity. A child learns to survive by disappearing from their own story, and though years may pass, that lesson doesn't fade. It lingers in the adult who shrugs off love, in the friend who laughs away praise, in the person who spends their birthday pretending it's nothing. But defenses built in childhood were never meant to last a lifetime. One day, that grown-up will have to meet the child they buried, the one who never got their candle lit, and ask what it truly means to feel seen. Because before the mask of indifference ever formed, there was a face that only wanted to be noticed. By the time you're grown, the world expects you to be composed, rational, above the need for things like birthday candles and surprises. So, when your birthday comes around, you keep it simple, maybe a quiet dinner, maybe nothing at all. You call it maturity. You tell yourself you've outgrown the need to be celebrated. But the truth is quieter and heavier. Somewhere inside, the child you once were still listens for the sound of a door opening, still waits for a voice saying, "I remembered." Now, that child hides behind a polished mask, the mask of indifference. You wear it to work, to social gatherings, even to your own reflection. When someone asks, "Hey, it's your birthday, right?" you laugh it off. "Oh, that? Yeah, I don't really celebrate." But in that laugh, there's a pause small enough that only your nervous system notices. A flicker of tension in the chest, a tiny ache in the throat. You've learned to suppress the impulse to hope. Psychologists call this the avoidance self-concept, the identity built from emotional avoidance. The brain, conditioned by early disappointment, learns to equate detachment with safety. Every time you downplay something that matters, you're protecting yourself from a ghost, the memory of being let down. The Stoic birthday isn't about maturity, it's about control. If you act like it doesn't matter, no one can fail you again. You see it in others too. The co-worker who disappears early before anyone can sing. The friend who declines dinner plans, claiming to be busy. The partner who insists on no gifts, but later feels quietly hurt when their wish is granted too literally. These aren't people without feelings, they're people fluent in self-denial. They've turned invisibility into a form of dignity, a mask polished so perfectly that even they forget it's there. Yet beneath that mask, something still stirs. Neuroscientists studying social reward circuitry have found that even when people consciously reject attention, their brains still light up when receiving acknowledgement. The body knows before the mind admits it. Recognition is nourishment. You can starve yourself of it for years, but the hunger never dies, it only hides. So you spend each birthday performing this quiet ritual of restraint, telling yourself you don't care, while secretly noticing every forgotten message, every unmade call. And when someone does remember when they show up, even in small ways you don't know how to receive it. Gratitude feels awkward, joy feels unfamiliar, love feels dangerous. You've become an expert in seeming whole, a master of appearing strong while quietly folding inward. But masks, no matter how noble they look, always cost something. And yours, the stoic smile on the day of your birth, is starting to crack, because beneath every calm adult who claims not to care, there's still a child whispering, "Please, just remember me." There's a strange irony in pretending you don't need something that your biology was designed to crave. You tell yourself you're fine without attention, that you don't need praise, affection, or recognition, but your nervous system disagrees. Deep inside the brain, where words and reasoning can't reach, ancient circuits wait for the smallest signs of acknowledgement. A smile, a name remembered, a hand on the shoulder. To the body, these moments are nourishment. To the mind trained in suppression, they feel dangerous. Psychologists call it self-effacement, the learned art of making yourself smaller to avoid emotional risk. It's not humility, it's survival. When you've spent years being met with indifference, your brain rewires itself to associate visibility with pain. Each time your need for recognition is ignored or dismissed, your limbic system, the emotional core of the brain, triggers a defensive response. It begins to pair attention with vulnerability, reward with danger. So, you pull back, you make less noise, you start to convince yourself that wanting anything at all is weakness. Carl Jung described this as the shadow of humility, the hidden, distorted form of self-denial that masquerades as virtue. And modern psychology gives it another name: defensive devaluation. When a person cannot safely have what they long for, whether it's love, validation, or belonging, they devalue it. It's easier to say, "I don't care," than to admit, "I care, but I don't feel safe enough to show it." This mechanism is the mind's quiet rebellion against helplessness. It numbs the ache by calling it peace. Neuroscience adds another layer to this paradox. When you receive genuine recognition, your brain releases dopamine and oxytocin, the chemicals responsible for bonding and motivation. But when you suppress your own need for connection, those same systems fall silent. Over time, this silence becomes the new normal. The absence of emotional reward begins to feel like control. Yet, in truth, it's a neurological starvation, a slow shrinking of the circuits that once made you feel alive in the presence of others. Brené Brown calls this the armor of shame, the walls we build to protect our dignity that, ironically, trap us inside loneliness. Because every time you deny your own need to be seen, you reinforce the belief that you are undeserving of it. What looks like independence is often just a beautifully constructed cage. And this is the haunting part. You can live your entire life behind that armor and never realize that strength isn't the absence of need, it's the courage to honor it. The ones who appear the calmest are often the most disconnected from themselves, mistaking numbness for peace, solitude for self-sufficiency. But the silence doesn't last forever. Eventually, something cracks: a kind word, an unexpected gesture, a forgotten song that makes you remember what longing felt like. And when it does, the mask of emotional self-sufficiency begins to tremble. Because beneath the science and defenses, your humanity still waits patient, hungry, and ready to be remembered again. There comes a point where silence stops being peaceful and starts becoming a kind of death. You tell yourself it's dignity, that not needing recognition is a sign of strength, but deep down, something colder has taken root. You no longer celebrate, not because you're humble, but because you've forgotten what it feels like to be worth celebrating. You move through life like a shadow among the living, reliable, kind, composed, but untouched by joy. People describe you as selfless, and you nod, secretly grateful that no one notices how empty that word has become. You wake up, you work, you give. You carry the weight of everyone's needs but your own. You've become the quiet one who remembers everyone's birthdays but your own. You buy the gifts, plan the surprises, light the candles for others, yet, when it's your turn, you wave it away, pretending you don't need the same warmth you so easily give. And each time you do, your light dims just a little more. You are the candle that burns, but never asks to be lit. The irony is cruel. What began as protection from pain has turned into a ritual of self-erasure. In psychology, this is called learned invisibility, the pattern of making yourself small because somewhere in your story, being seen once led to hurt. The brain confuses absence with safety, teaching you that invisibility equals survival. Over time, this becomes an identity, a quiet one, yes, but also a lonely one. The self that hides for too long begins to forget its own outline. It stops asking for love, not because it doesn't want it, but because it no longer believes it's possible to receive it without consequence. Neuroscience suggests that emotional suppression numbs not only pain but pleasure too. When you shut down one end of the emotional spectrum, you silence the other. The same walls that keep heartbreak out also keep connection from coming in, so you drift through the years calm, functional, yet profoundly disconnected. You stop seeking meaning because meaning requires vulnerability, and vulnerability was once your wound. This is the dark side of emotional stoicism, a life that looks serene from the outside but feels hollow from within. The refusal to be celebrated becomes symbolic, a quiet rebellion against existence itself, because to celebrate life is to admit you're here, that you matter, that your presence deserves to be witnessed, and for those who've lived too long in the shadows, even that truth feels unbearable. But the tragedy of invisibility is not that no one sees you, it's that you no longer see yourself. Somewhere along the line, you stopped lighting your own candle, afraid of how fragile the flame might be. Yet, somewhere beneath the ash of old disappointments, the ember still waits patient, flickering, aching to be noticed once more. Because when you've spent years hiding from the light, even the faintest glow can feel like resurrection. You've probably heard it before, "I love how low maintenance you are." It sounds like a compliment, doesn't it? A badge of honor in a world exhausted by drama and need. You nod, maybe even smile, because you've spent years earning that title, the calm one, the easy one, the person who doesn't ask for much. But somewhere inside, it doesn't feel like pride. It feels like erasure disguised as virtue. We live in a culture that worships composure, where silence is elegance and need is a flaw to be outgrown. The chill person becomes the modern saint, unbothered, adaptable, endlessly understanding. You've learned that if you want to be loved, you must make it effortless for others to love you. You must never need too much, never expect too deeply, never take up more emotional space than what's politely allowed. The result is a generation of people quietly starving for intimacy, while applauding each other's restraint. Social media makes this illusion worse. Scroll long enough and you'll see it, the performance of serenity, the curated stillness that hides the exhaustion beneath. Everyone pretending to be fine, to be above the human mess of longing. The unspoken message seeps into your bloodstream. Needing others makes you weak. You internalize it until it becomes instinct. You stop sharing when you're hurt, stop speaking when you're lonely. You post a quote about independence instead. Psychologically, this is cultural conditioning at work. Emotional suppression isn't just personal, it's systemic. Studies on emotional regulation show that when societies overvalue stoicism, they create what researchers call collective emotional neglect. Entire communities begin to perceive vulnerability as immaturity. We start rewarding disconnection. We mistake avoidance for peace and numbness for strength. And so, the low-maintenance ideal thrives not because people are happier that way, but because it keeps relationships convenient. But here's the quiet truth. There's no such thing as a truly low-maintenance human being. You are made of need, biological, emotional, spiritual. Your brain is wired for connection. Your nervous system built to regulate through others. Denying that doesn't make you evolved. It makes you quietly disintegrate. The more you suppress the need to be understood, the more you drift into what psychologists call emotional dissonance, living a life that looks calm but feels hollow. At its core, this myth is a tragedy, a culture that teaches you to celebrate your own disappearance. And the more you hide behind that effortless persona, the more invisible you become. Because the truth is, even the most self-contained soul still longs to be seen. So ask yourself, when did we start mistaking emotional restraint for wisdom? And when did being easy to love start, meaning you had to stop being real? Soon, that quiet invisibility will have a cost of the slow decay of connection itself. And that's where the story turns next. There's a peculiar kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being unseen. You sit at a dinner table, the soft hum of conversation around you, and no one remembers what day it is. You smile, pretend you prefer it that way, make a joke to lighten the silence, but deep down, something inside you turns to dust. You scroll through polite birthday messages later that night. The ones sent out of obligation, copied and pasted with the same hollow tone. You reply with gratitude you don't feel. Because what hurts isn't the absence of noise, it's the absence of sincerity. You've become so used to being invisible that even when people do look at you, they see the mask instead. This is how it happens, not all at once, but slowly, imperceptibly, the quiet decay of connection. The person who once laughed freely now measures every word, every gesture. You begin to exist more in your mind than in the world. When friends forget to invite you, you tell yourself they're busy. When loved ones overlook your efforts, you tell yourself it's fine. But the human heart is not designed for constant dismissal. It begins to close, like a flower starved of light, conserving energy in the hope that indifference will stop hurting someday. Neuroscience shows that chronic emotional neglect physically alters the brain's architecture. The areas responsible for reward, bonding, and joy begin to dim. Dopamine becomes harder to release. Oxytocin, the chemical of trust and connection, becomes scarce. You start to feel detached, not just from others, but from yourself. It's not sadness anymore, it's emptiness. A low, constant hum of meaninglessness that follows you everywhere, and yet you still call it peace. Because to admit you're lonely would mean facing the truth that you've built your life around not needing anyone, and now you've become trapped by that very belief. What's most haunting is how others learn from your silence. When you treat yourself as unimportant, they follow your lead. They forget your worth because you've taught them to. Every "it's okay," every "don't worry about it" becomes a quiet instruction, a lesson in how to overlook you without consequence. Over time, your invisibility stops being a defense and becomes your identity. And so, your birthday passes. Another candle unlit, another year folded neatly into the background of other people's lives. You tell yourself you don't mind, but deep inside, your soul whispers a quiet rebellion, a longing to be remembered, to be chosen, to feel alive in the eyes of another. Because this was never about a single day. It was about your capacity to exist fully, to be seen, felt, and loved in the brief and fragile miracle of being human. And until you reclaim that truth, every passing year will feel less like living and more like slowly fading away. Healing begins, not in grand gestures, but in the smallest flickers of self-recognition. It starts when you pause long enough to realize how long you've gone without hearing your own name spoken with warmth. When you notice how effortlessly you deflect compliments or how you laugh away gratitude. It starts when you admit quietly, honestly, that you have been starving for something simple, to be seen. But this time, you do not wait for someone else to remember you. You begin to remember yourself. Maybe you light a candle one night, not because it's your birthday, but because you want to feel the warmth of being alive. Maybe you buy a single cupcake, not as an act of vanity, but as an offering to the child who once watched others blow out theirs. Maybe you write a letter to that forgotten version of you, the one who stopped asking for attention, the one who thought love had to be earned. You tell them they were always worthy, even when no one noticed. Psychologists call this process earned secure attachment, the gradual rewiring of the nervous system to believe it is safe to be loved. You learn that recognition doesn't have to come from others. It can begin within you. Each small act of self-acknowledgement, a deep breath, a gentle "I'm proud of you," a moment of stillness without shame, teaches your body that it's no longer in danger. That joy no longer needs to be suppressed. That being visible doesn't mean being hurt. Neuroscience tells us that the brain is plastic, capable of reshaping itself through new emotional experiences. When you allow yourself to receive care, even in solitude, you awaken dormant neural pathways that once lit up in the presence of love. You begin to rebuild the architecture of safety, one kind moment at a time. And as you do, something subtle shifts. The world starts reflecting back the way you now see yourself. People begin to notice you not because you demand attention, but because you finally stopped hiding from it. Healing, then, is not about celebration in the traditional sense. It's about rebellion, a quiet defiance against a lifetime of emotional invisibility. It's saying, "I will no longer disappear just to be acceptable." You stop mistaking invisibility for peace, humility for self-erasure. You let light touch your face without apologizing for it. You let joy return, even if it trembles at first. You realize, perhaps for the first time, that existing is enough reason to be honored. You don't need permission to take up space in your own story. You just need to begin. And when you do, when you light that candle for yourself, the flame doesn't just illuminate your room. It reaches backward into every shadowed year and whispers to the forgotten child within. You were never unworthy. You were simply waiting to be seen. And now you are. There's a moment, quiet, unrecorded, when the universe decided it could not continue without you. A fraction of eternity folded inward, and from the fabric of everything, a pulse emerged. That pulse was you. You, with all your contradictions, your quiet fears, your endless becoming. The day you were born was not random, it was an interruption in the silence of non-existence. The moment time itself made room for your story. And yet, somewhere along the way, you forgot. You started treating your birthday like a chore, another mark on the calendar of obligations. You told yourself it didn't matter, that existence was ordinary. But the truth is, there is nothing ordinary about being here, breathing, seeing, remembering. Out of all the infinite possibilities, you are the one who made it through. You are the one who continues. Even stars have a day they begin to burn. They do not question whether they are worthy of shining, they simply ignite. And perhaps that's what your birthday is, not a demand for attention, but a reminder of ignition. The day you first caught fire, the day consciousness found a vessel and called it you. You are not meant to shrink from that. You are meant to remember it reverently. Philosophers like Albert Camus once said that life's beauty lies in its absurdity, that even in a universe that owes you nothing, the fact that you exist is rebellion enough. To live is to stand defiantly against the nothingness that almost was. To open your eyes each morning is to whisper, "I am still here," and in that whisper lives something sacred, not the arrogance of existence, but its gratitude. Neuroscience might say you're made of atoms and firing neurons, but those atoms remember the stars. The same matter that fuels galaxies runs through your veins. When your heart beats, it echoes a rhythm that began long before humans had words for time. So, when you think your birthday is trivial, consider this. The entire universe had to align every collapse, every collision, every ancestor for you to arrive. Exactly when you did. Maybe that's why life asks for your acknowledgement, not through parties or noise, but through presence. Maybe all it wants is for you to stop just once a year and remember that you are still burning quietly, beautifully, against the vast dark. So when that day comes again, don't treat it like a number. Treat it like a truce between you and time, between you and the silence that came before you, because you were chosen not by accident, but by necessity. The universe needed a story only you could tell. And every year, on that same day, it waits for you to remember that the light you carry was never borrowed, it was always yours.